Richard, welcome to Roffey Park.
Thank you, Pete.
So you talk a lot about the body in leadership. Tell me, why the body? What's so important about the body in leadership?
Well, to begin with, I think that we need to disabuse ourselves of the idea of body. When we say body, we're really thrown to think of the cover of somebody on a magazine or in the movies and what that looks like, and or how somebody might do a tennis match or a golf game. But really, when we talk about body, I'm really referring to the notion of how we take action, how we manage our mood, how we coordinate with other people, how we produce dignity, and how we're learning. Right. And that all comes from the learning body. From the body. And that comes from the somatic discourse, which comes from the ancient Greek, which really means the living body in its wholeness, which didn't separate mind and body and emotions and language, but all had them in one single body, a
right.
Soma.
Okay. So this is a metaphor then for leadership, or is there something else there?
At its base, it's much more than a metaphor. If you think that we don't have bodies, but that we are bodies, and the bodies that we are will be the lives that we lead, and that the same as in language, the stories that we are will be the lives that we lead. So at its fundamental place, it's much, much more than a metaphor. It certainly has metaphorical value, that one can take certain kinds of actions, and in these actions, one will draw a metaphor to other places in their life. But if you think about it, there's no place that we are not our body. Where we are, our bodies will be. And how we live in our bodies will be very much the kind of futures that we produce.
Right. So then how is this distinct then from body language?
Well, body language is very prescriptive. If this person does this, it equals this. If I hold myself this way, therefore I'm sending this message. And what it does is it belies the deep notion that we live in a historical time, we live in different cultures, we live in different communities of practice, and that's different worldwide. That's different worldwide. And that we have to remember that the way that we are actually moving with somebody, if we hold that with intent, if we hold with intent the way that we move with somebody, coordinate with them, have stories and conversations with them, that we have a much larger possibility of affecting the outcome in the future of that.
Right. So looking at the business world of today, what concerns in the business world of today do you think that this work answers?
One thing for sure is what we see is that there's a very high turnover rate, that in business people are looking at retainability, and we know now that people don't leave their companies. What they do is they leave their managers and they leave their leaders. And one of the greatest complaints that they have is that they feel anonymous in the workplace. They don't feel seen. People don't feel like their skills and their gifts and their talents are being used, and that they have a lack of purpose in the workplace. By working somatically or working through the body, is that we have this opportunity of, leaders have an opportunity of much more deeply and clearly seeing the people that work with them, seeing the ways that they can motivate and mobilize them, how they coordinate with them, and that more than anything, people want to be acknowledged. And it's a very simple thing for somebody to awaken themselves in their body so the other person is left with the assessment that this person gets me, they see me, and they're acknowledging me.
See, there are a lot of people out there who are talking about leadership. There are, a lot of thousands of books on Amazon about leadership. What is it about what you're doing that is different, that gives somebody something that they're not going to get from those other books and the other courses?
Traditionally in leadership, we learn leadership we have a model of a leader, and we read what this leader has done and how they did these things. We read that in a book. We have conversations about that. We see a PowerPoint. And inside of the distinctions of this leadership, we can see how he or she has been successful. But simply what's missing is none of that teaches us how to take the actions to be a leader. We see somebody else has done it and how they've done it, but we don't know ourselves what we can do. And often if we just try something on like they did, it appears inauthentic and superficial. Our interest is how a person can take an action that they previously couldn't take. That's our definition of learning, your ability to take an action you couldn't previously take, so that when they leave the courses that we do, people then can act in different ways. And what we hear all the time is that people go back out into the workplace, and people say, "You're different. You're managing your mood different. You're managing the team's mood differently. We're coordinating more effectively together. You're executing on your commitments, and these are all the things that we want. And you're doing it in a way in which you're holding the values, your values, and also the values of the team.
So it sounds to me like you're creating a distinction between knowing about leadership and actually being able to lead.
Yes, absolutely. There's one thing to be able to academically understand what leadership is or have a definition of it, and to formulate a theory or a philosophy behind it. It's an absolutely different thing to be able to act in a way in which somebody says you're a more effective leader, and there's ways that you act in the world that affect people and influence them, motivate them, so that we move towards the results that we're looking for. In the surgery room, the surgeon doesn't say, pass the butter knife. He says, pass the scalpel. It's a knife. It's a very sharp knife, but that's a piece of jargon. It's very important that when you go through a course is that you understand that you've been in a contained environment, and inside this environment, the people that you go back to don't have the distinctions that you do, so that you translate it inside of your own idiom, your own conversational space. And in doing that, it's much more of an easy segue into the workplace. And we help people do that so that they can move from the course of learning into the course of the workplace.
Okay. And if someone was to come and work with you, if I was to come and work with you, for example, what would I get from that? What would be different?
The work we do with the body at Strozzi Institute, learning leadership through the body, is people learn how to be more centered in times of stress, so that when they get thrown off center, they understand how to come back to center. By that I mean that they're more present, they're more open to possibilities, and they're more connected to others and themselves. People are better observers of mood, their own mood, and the people that they work with. And they're able to manage that mood. And this is a key operational factor for leaders, is being able to manage mood. Because you can have a lot of resources, you can have a lot of talent, intellectual capacity, but if the mood's off, everything will go off. You'll be able to more easily build trust with others. The way that you're speaking to them, the way that you're listening to them, the way that you're fulfilling on your promises will build trust much more quickly. You'll be able to coordinate with people much more effectively. So the whole notion of what's too much and what's too little. Where do I raise my voice? Where do I soften my voice? Where is it necessary to be very quiet? Where is it necessary to extend out into the world? Those kinds of distinctions in human interactions become very, very operational.
And so finally, could you tell us a little bit about what are your ambitions for this work? Where do you see it going in the future?
Well, about 700-800 years ago in the West, the philosophy from Descartes and his cohorts was to separate the mind and the body. And that took care of a specific concern at that time. And what it has done now, besides giving us great value like medicine and law and engineering, is that we've learned to separate our minds and our bodies. We've learned to separate our emotions out, other people out, nature out, so that we simply start to see ourselves as this talking, walking head. And that's produced great problems and conflicts in the world. So I would arguably say that the reason that almost all conflict in the world now leads to violence, the way that we're trashing our environment, and the way that there's a growing space, a growing rift between the haves and the have-not. This disenfranchisement has to do with the reasons that we're not living in our body. That we're not, what I mean by living in our body, that our felt sense of life, the energetic, felt, intuitive sense of life has disappeared, and we begin to see things as objects that we can treat as instrumental means. And there's a great cost to this right now. And I would offer that by being able to move more effectively from the inside out, that we're able to confront these problems in a much more effective way.
So thank you, Richard, for taking this time to talk to us this morning. And I'm looking forward to what promises to be a great masterclass today. Thank you.
You're welcome.